Continuing on with the habitat, our wing is complete, so we can turn it off. But we need to make a modification to another existing body. We need to add legs to the housing pod. Rather than creating freestanding bodies for the legs, we'll turn the housing pod back on, start a new sketch on the bottom, again using a polygon, this time a triangle to space the legs out. I'll add circles to the endpoints of the triangle, setting a diameter of 2.5 millimeters to the first leg. Then, rather than applying dimensions to the other two circles, use the equal constraint to make sure that all of the legs are the same size. An option that's been explored in other lessons is to use construction geometry, but in this case I'll leave the triangle normal geometry and simply select the 6 different sections to define the cylinders. I'll extrude them out 6 millimeters, joining them to the housing pod, and turn the ramp on. In other exercises, we've used joints to relocate components and to connect them together. For the habitat, we're working with bodies. Bodies cannot be joined. However, the geometry of bodies can be used to reference the location of other bodies. From the Modify pull-down of either the Patch workspace or the Model workspace, I can start the Align tool. I'll make sure the Object option is set to Bodies, and then pick the bottom edge of the housing pod. For the second location, I'll pick the top edge of the ramp, and it will relocate the housing pod. When I click OK, the housing pod will be in its new location, aligned with the ramp. I'll turn the wing back on, and for clarity, turn the ramp off. This time, I'll use the Move Copy tool to relocate the wing. I'll select the bottom edge of the wing, and it will give me a manipulator that will allow me to rotate the wing in place. I'll rotate it to be horizontal, so -90 degrees in my model, and then use the arrow or plane manipulators to move it up and back to its proper position with the housing pod. When it's in the correct position, I'll simply click OK and take a look at the work. Now what I need to do is replicate the housing pod and the wings to a second location. I'll start the Move Copy tool again, making sure that the Move object is still set to Bodies. I'll select the housing pod and the wing, and using the Create Copy option, use the manipulator to create a second instance of the housing pod and wing, move it back, and rotate it 90 degrees into its correct position. Now I have one side of the habitat complete. At the center of the habitat is a control pod. To create it, I'll switch to the Model workspace, go to the Create pull-down, and use the Sphere primitive. I'll select the origin of the model as the center point. Setting the diameter to 36, you'll see that the operation is cutting material away from the other bodies. Because this new primitive exists at the same level as the other bodies, the natural assumption is that we want to cut geometry from the existing bodies. I'll use the Operation pull-down to switch this to a new body, and when I click OK, it will create a sphere based on the origin of the design. Now I'll use the Move Copy tool to relocate the sphere -38 millimeters to the left and 37 millimeters back so that it aligns properly with the recently created wing. Looking at the front view, I see that it has to be raised as well. I'll raise the sphere up its radius, which is 18, and then click OK to finish relocating it. The last step in creating the major portion of the habitat is to replicate the wings and housing pods to the other side of the sphere. But I chose to start generating my design with the origin located to what is now the side. To accommodate this, I could either move the entire assembly over to the right 38 millimeters, or I can create a construction plane that is offset 38 millimeters to create a new center plane. With this complete, I'll use the Mirror tool from the Create pull-down, make sure the pattern type is set to Bodies, and select the instances of the ramp, housing pod, and wings that are in the design. Setting the mirror plane to the newly created construction plane, we have the mirror of our bodies. In the next lesson, we'll finish the final detailing of the design.